Welcome to the program. My name is Philip Banse for DCTP.tv from the Republica 2016 in Berlin. And my next guest is Saskia Sassen. She's a sociologist from the Columbia University. Welcome to the program. So I'd like to talk to you about migrants because it's a huge topic right now in Europe. And I don't know, you didn't phrase the term, but you mentioned that those migrants coming to Europe are new in some ways. Why are they new? What's so new about the migrants coming to Europe these days?
Right. Well, they're not all new. Let's put it that way. What I'm arguing is that besides the two familiar types of migrations, one war-induced. I mean, war is a major source.
And has always been a major source.
But it has often been, that we call them refugees. If there is war that pushes them out, they are a refugee. That's a clear subject, historically, and there is a regime that captures it.
Yeah.
And then we have the migrant. The migrant is mostly an economic migrant, not a political migrant, And that is another clear subject we have had historically, and every country has law about migration.
And what characterizes those migrants? They leave their country because?
They leave their country in search of something that can add to their lives. But important for me is that they leave behind a home, a community. They want that community to do better. They often do go back. We underestimate how many migrants actually are in strong contact with their, with their families back home, and how many go back. They go back with money, they go back with something. But there is a sense of the migrant as a strong subject. The refugee is a subject in crisis.
Yeah.
The migrant is strong. She has a project. She's going to fulfill that project, etc., etc. I argue that today, this is the new part, today we have a third type of migrating subject who's neither recognized as a refugee because war is not what leads them to leave, nor are they a migrant because there is no more home. Home is either a mine, a mining operation, a plantation, it's underwater, climate change, it's a desert. Or it's a city. A lot of the expansion of cities has expelled lots of people. So we have a kind of economic development, not necessarily the best form of development, kind of economic development refugee. And for this refugee, we have no regime. When that person appears at our borders, that person is invisible. The law, whether it is an international regime or a local country law, cannot see that person. In her full flesh, in her full body, she doesn't exist. And that is what I argue. We need to develop regimes that have to do with governing and recognizing the devastating effect of the kind of mining we're seeing. And our electronic revolution has 7 items. And it's a terrible kind of mining because it's not a developed system of mining. So it's totally destructive and poisons water and earth, and the big plantations, the expansion of cities, and climate change. We have no regimes that enable those people to say, there is no home for me to go back to. I have no place to go to. And that is sort of the argument, and this is what I will be talking about.
And what kind of regime can that be?
We have to make it. UNHCR was made. National law about immigration, whether it's good or bad, was made. This is time to make new regimes. We must do that because I think what we're seeing here in Europe, yes, we have the war refugees, yes, we have the more old-fashioned migrants, and then we have a new type of migration. And we are seeing the beginning, I think. When I look at the various parts of the world, what's happening, there are about 100 corporations and about 15 countries that are buying land. It's also now moving into Europe. So in England, North England, a huge stretch of land was just bought I mean, the Saudis are buying up Bosnia and, those. So these migrants, some of them, you see, that are appearing at the border of Europe, they are a vanguard, I think, of something that is going to be much bigger. And we're not ready. We don't have the instruments.
And is it really a new phenomenon? Because there has always been natural catastrophes.
Yeah.
There's always been capitalism.
Yes.
There's always been huge companies,
Yes.
United Fruits, etc.,
Yeah.
who bought land and expelled people from their land. Is it really a new phenomenon?
Well, that is why I call it a loss of habitat, a massive loss of habitat. It's not new. I mean, the United States has been using African land and Central American land and has left a lot of dead land behind. I document that in my new book. You're right, this is not new. What is new is the scaling up. It's just, wow, again, those 7 components of the electronic revolution. That's a whole new kind of mining. That means mining in areas where they never mined before, you see. That's very interesting in itself. And now, I always say, footnote here, some of those components, they're right here. Are we going to destroy Berlin? Are we going to destroy, Los Angeles? To get at that, we're not ready for that. So what do? We go find it in less built-up areas. The actual mining materials that we're after, they exist in many places. The problem is that we've built them over. So they go to Africa. They go to certain parts of Latin America, etc. But so it is not new in itself. What is new is the scale up.
The scale. And you mentioned one factor that drives the scale and that fuels this kind of development is the electronic
revolution.
What else? What about the digital revolution? Is that?
I mean that too. I mean, of course, the digital. I mean, everything that is this new computer world.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about all the garbage that we're producing. This notion that people have to buy a new phone every year or a new computer every year. And mind you, there are universities, like my university, New York University, where my husband teaches, they will pay him to buy a new computer every year. Same thing for me. Do you understand how irrational that is? Who benefits from that? The computer makers.
Of course.
Not Mother Nature.
and what is the role of banks and the financial system in driving this development?
Well, I mean, look, I am always happy to find that finance is also present in whatever other negative condition is in the world. But I must say, I mean, finance in this case is truly secondary.
Yeah?
Yes. This electronic revolution that we're talking about, finance is secondary. I mean, the industry itself, look at Microsoft. Microsoft is the first one that makes visible a whole new economic model. They actually managed to make money, endless amounts of money, on something rather simple that they invented once and can then sort of, millions and millions and millions. I mean, it is a kind of, Google is even better. Google doesn't make anything, but Google is now beginning to make, I know. But, for years, Google, I always say, there is a kind of extractive logic. It's not unlike mining. Google takes information that is available, and then has sold it. Now they're beginning to make stuff, all kinds of things. True. But these are amazing sectors. So I think they have in the whole electronic sector, yes, they needed venture capital. Yes, they need but they also have an endogenous way of generating cash on a scale without risking too much. It's not like building a huge factory.
All right. I'd like to stick a little bit with the migrant situation, though. You mentioned some of those factors which are driving the new scale of those kinds of new, I don't know, ecological migrants or whatever you want to call them. What would you say? What can be done politically to I don't know, to stop is
Right. I mean,
is too, is a
that's
little
right.
bit too much. But what
that's
can we
the
do
big
political
question.
about it?
That is a big question, you see, because they are invisible. We don't see them. We don't make that connection. The problem also for the experts. The experts have their own little closed domains. So I do this in my expulsions book. I'm beginning to say, let's pick up on those items that actually cut across domains. So to give a very simple example, I say that long-term prisoners,
Yeah.
long-term displaced people due to war, third-generation refugee camps, the growing number of people who are simply thrown out of their homes, out of their livelihoods. There are homeless people now everywhere in the world, on a scale that we hadn't seen in a very long time. Do they share something? Is there something that is recurrence of a very foundational mode of being out, no matter the different silos within which we have understood that war, economics, whatever? Do we need to actually find categories for analyzing that allow us to cut across, not just to keep on working within the silos? And I think with this migration, see, what you have often among the experts is you have the experts on refugees.
Yeah.
And they know everything about the and then you have the experts on migration. They very often know very little about.
Strange.
And now I argue we have this third kind of migrant. And we really don't have the language to capture that. So we mix it up. Well, is it a refugee or is it an economic migrant? Well, there's no war, economic migrant. But they're not. They are refugees. And they're not just climate change refugees, because that is a more recognized. They're also refugees from the expansion of mines and from the expansion of plantation agriculture. Water extraction, another one that leaves whole areas without water. What can people do if they don't have a government that trucks it in, like in India? Nestle and Coca-Cola managed to exhaust 2 regions, all the water gone. And they're now busy in the US, very controversial. So if you don't have a government who trucks in the water as they do in India, and in Africa they wouldn't do that because they don't have it together, the roads are not there, whatever. So we are dealing with a kind of population that is different on the scale at which it is happening from what we have historically seen. We have seen particular elements of that. When a piece of land really goes dry, this has happened in the Midwest of the United States. I'm sure in many other parts, but this is on a different scale.
And what can we do about it? I mean,
I think there are 2 very
push.
important vectors. One of them is the climate change vector, and we are moving slowly. And when I see the modesty of policy, I've written about this, I think that's going to get us nowhere. I have a graph that I will show. If we implemented so this is how the curve is. If we're going to implement all the many treaties, it's all talk. The difference is like that. We go from that to that.
The adaptation is still huge, right? Yeah.
But the other issue is then recognizing also the people who are being affected by that. But it's not just climate change. It is the land grabs, as I said. It is the mining. It is water extraction, etc., etc. And when you look at plantation and mining, they are extremely destructive. Plantation kills earth very quickly. So we're going to have more, not less of that. And all I'm saying is, here is a subject, a new type of historic subject. We must recognize this subject, or we're going to go crazy sorting it out. Neither war refugee, nor. And we must make the mining companies and the plantation companies, and there are about 100 corporations and about 15 governments that are the most active, buyers of land, etc. We must deal with it. They must be governed. They must take on some responsibility for the displacement.
How can we make them or hold them responsible?
Well, look, this is always a challenge. We have failed miserably. The Global Compact, there have been a whole series. But when you take a long enough trajectory, just to give a simple example, the struggle for women's rights, the struggle for black people's rights, at any 100 years struggle, at any point you would have said, this is going nowhere. And then eventually something is achieved. I think we don't have that kind of time. We don't have 100 years. I think there is enough mobilizing that something can happen. I mean, maybe I'm an optimist, but we need to make new instruments to govern these, to make them responsible. They have to clean up. They can't just leave all the toxic drudge that they, leave. They have to recognize that, protect smallholder agriculture, etc., etc. We have to do this. Now, when we started talking about climate change 30 years ago, it looked an impossible task. We are making little. The Paris agreements do make a difference, and so I'm just an analyst. I'm not a policy person.
Are you optimistic that we will go forward in terms of tracing and trading fair resources?
I mean, I see little changes. Fair trade is a good example, protecting the small growers and all of that. Frankly, I think this is a very brutal world. And I think it will be a while, and in the meantime we will have destroyed a vast amount. I am not that optimistic. That does not keep me from hollering about the matter. I do think that, I think that awareness is one element. I also think, I may be wrong there, that there is a kind of new entrepreneur about that, and you see that every now and then, that who says, yeah, we have to deal with this. I think we're still dealing with an older class of politicians, frankly. Age is not the issue here. It's an older mode, and an older mode of corporate leaders. I think their ground is becoming a bit wobbly. That is the most positive and optimistic statement I can make, because there is a mass of people all over the world, different forms of knowledge, different politics, who is focused on this. Both are minorities, but this minority has made a hell of a lot of difference to our lives. Let's hope that this other minority, which is a bit larger actually in numbers, can also make a difference.
Saskia Sassen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for watching DCTP.tv from the Republica 2016. My name is Philip Banse. You'll find more videos on DCTP.tv or in our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned. Bye.